Hi, everyone. Welcome to the talk about opening a window to OpenAI. My name is Natalie Pistunovich, and I work at the database company Aerospike. So what is OpenAI? It's a nonprofit artificial intelligence research company that is working on solving the problem of general artificial intelligence by building a software that can learn to solve any task you will give it. What does OpenAI do? OpenAI works on many different projects with the main focus of learning algorithms. OpenAI is trying to build systems that can learn to solve any task you will give it from experience rather than being explicitly programmed to solve it. Why does OpenAI exist? The founders of OpenAI believe that artificial intelligence has the potential to help humanity solve some of its most pressing challenges, like climate change and disease diagnosis. But there's also many ways in which AI could do wrong and cause harm, even to its own creators. This is the reason that OpenAI is building a safe AI system that will benefit humanity as a whole. So what is OpenAI doing right now? The main project is focused on reinforced learning, teaching agents how to behave in environments by interacting with them directly rather than following pre-programmed instructions like in chess or in the board game Go. And OpenAI is also using this to build systems that can learn to play games, drive a car, and even perform a surgery. What is reinforcement learning? Reinforcement learning is a type of machine learning where the agent learns by interacting with the environment rather than being explicitly programmed. The agent is trying different things and get a feedback, whether it was good or bad, positive or negative reinforcement. And based on this, it takes the decision what to do next. This type of learning is inspired by how animals seem to learn about the world through trial and error rather than pre-programmed instructions. How does OpenAI is using reinforcement learning? In many different ways. For example, training agents directly on raw pixels in Atari games, or training agents on simulated robot arms, and more. So, what else is there to say? Oh, yeah, about me. So, Natalie Pistunovich is an entrepreneur, a writer, and a public speaker. She is the founder of the Human Startup, a platform that helps people create their own startups. Natalie started her first company at the age of 16, which she grew into a 10 million annual revenue business by the time she was 19. She has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, Entrepreneur Inc., and many more. She has spoken at numerous events like TEDx, SXSW, and the United Nations. Natalie is a graduate of the University of Washington, where she studied business and entrepreneurship. But wait, that's not me. So what is this? This is what I got as a response when I asked GPT-3 about myself. This is me. I am a Google developer expert for Go. I am an OpenAI ambassador. I'm a big enthusiast of the Go programming language, and I work as a lead developer advocate at Aerospike. I studied computer and software engineering, but that was back in Israel. So what did we just see? We saw, until now, a completely machine-generated presentation. That previous slide, the top line is what I asked OpenGPT-3 about myself, and the blue block of text is what it responded. And you know what? All the slides that we saw before that is all output of the machine. Whoops. This is what the GPT-3 told me when I asked for content for slides for a presentation about opening a window to OpenAI. The 6 slides you saw, everything was machine generated. Was it good? So what else is there to say if we covered practically everything? Let's give it a try now from my content. What is AI? AI is an artificial intelligence So that's what it stands for, and it's an intelligence that is demonstrated by machines, in contrast to the natural intelligence that is displayed by humans. Who do you think said that? Let me give you a second quote. Artificial intelligence is a branch of computer science that aims to create intelligent machines that work and react like humans. Who said this? So here are two quotes. One, I Googled myself. One was told to me by GPT-3. Do you have a guess which is which? Well, here's the answer. GPT-3 says that this is a branch of computer science, while Wikipedia, which is written by humans at this point in time, says that this is intelligence that is demonstrated by machines. And you know what? Here's a really nice picture that I found on Twitter. This is a handle, the Alex Freeman, that explains also what is AI. TLDR is that it's so many things. Okay, so what is my take on what is OpenAI? OpenAI is a research and deployment company founded in 2015 with a mission to ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. What is artificial general intelligence? Basically, these are highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. And yes, the goal of benefiting humanity and being safe is definitely important. And the OpenAI team will even consider the mission fulfilled if the work that they do helps others achieve this outcome. As we continue in this slide, I want to tell you that if you watch this later, you can see in the top left part my name, so you'll know these are my slides. And in the few slides back, you can see that the top left says GPT-3, and this is how you know that these are the slides that are machine generated, in case you want to perform a comparison to see who did this better. So OpenAI has a few competitors like Google AI, who was trained on 1 trillion parameters. That's a huge number. And DeepMind, which is not so much of a competitor anymore because the company behind it, Microsoft, recently invested 1 billion into OpenAI. Let's talk about the different GPTs. What is a GPT? GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer Models, which are natural language processing models. These models can perform natural language processing tasks without any supervised training. Things they can do are, for example, answering questions, summarizing, and translating. What's special about them is that they need none too few examples to understand the tasks and perform something as good or even better than a state-of-the-art supervised model. So the first one, as you could imagine, was called GPT-1. Until this point, most of the NLP models were trained specifically on a particular task, like sentiment classification, textual entailment, and so on. And this was used supervised learning. But supervised learning has two major limitations. One, they need a really large amount of annotated data, which is not often available. And two, they fail to generalize if you give them any task that they were not trained for. So you can imagine how crazy things seemed when the paper about this was published in June 2018. The GPT-1 model was trained on 117 million parameters, and it performed better than most supervised trained models in most tasks that it was compared to. So imagine that. You give it a task with few or none examples, and it understands and it just performs. This is called zero-shot learning or few-shot learning, and the performance of it means that you ask the model to do something for the first time with either none or few examples, and it performs in a decent way. And that's a crazy thing to imagine. Then came GPT-2. GPT-2 was announced in February 2019, and the full version was released in November 2019 with training that happened on 1.5 billion parameters. Between those two dates, a few more versions were released with an increasing number of parameters that it's being trained on until it reached 1.5 billion in November. The performance of zero-shot learning and few-shot learning got way better, and it was considered good. So again, reminding that it means that it needed 0 to a few examples to understand the task that it sees for the first time, and it still outperforms models that were trained in a supervised way and were state-of-the-art, who were achieving the same tasks. And then June 2020 came GPT-3, which is the current model, latest model by OpenAI. It was trained on 175 billion parameters, and it has a really good, even great, zero-shot learning or few-shot learning. And to the level, it can create content or code and sometimes outperform humans. It's important to note that the model's training data cuts off in December 2019. So if anything new was added to the internet afterwards, it's not necessarily available in the brain of GPT-3. Now let's talk about the ways we can talk with GPT-3 and the different engines that make it. So there is an API, as you can imagine, but it's a general purpose text in, text out interface for any language task. Text in is the input and basically the instructions. The text out is the completion that the machine made in an attempt to match the context or the pattern. It's very different from other language APIs, which are designed for a single task like sentiment classification or named entity recognition. And what's interesting is that to program this or to have this conversation, the good rule of thumb is think about how would you write out a problem for a middle schooler to solve. And this is your input. Let's talk about the 4 engines in GPT-3. The first one and the fastest one is ADA. ADA engine is good at parsing text and address correction, and it's also good at classification tasks that don't require too much nuance. If you want to summarize, you can say that it's good at parsing text, simple classifications, address correction, and keywords. Next comes Babbage. Babbage can perform straightforward tasks like simple classification and semantic search, ranking how well documents match with the results of queries. So you can say that it's good at moderate classification, semantic search classification, and similar tasks. Then Curie. It's extremely powerful and it's very fast, and it's good for nuanced tasks like sentiment classification and summarization, and it's also good at answering questions and doing Q&A like a chatbot. So you can say that it's good at language translation, complex classifications, text sentiment, and at summarizing. And the last one is DaVinci. DaVinci is the most capable engine. It can perform any task that the other models can do, and normally it would require even less instructions. But it's most expensive one among the 4, so there's a cost for each ping to the API, and it's also the slowest. And by all means, it does not mean it's slow, it's really fast. And what it can do is understand content, like summarizing for a specific audience and content creative generation. It's also good in understanding the intent of text, solving logic problems, and explaining the motives of characters, for example. So you can say that it's good at complex intent, cause and effect, and summarization for specific audiences. And you all probably heard of DALL-E, which can create images from words. So here are some examples. You give it as a text an illustration of a baby Dakin radish in a tutu walking a dog, and lo and behold, this is what it creates. Or you ask for an armchair in the shape of avocado, and this is what it creates. So it's not just going to Google images and Googling for an avocado-shaped armchair. It actually creates that. Let's see some examples of OpenAI's GPT-3. The first one, which is an example of summarization, the input, which is the bolded part, is 2 paragraphs about Jupiter and a request to TLDR that. The output is 1.5 short lines that make a pretty decent summary, I would say. Next is an example of classification. We're giving as an input something that we state is a social media post, and the content of it is that the new episode of The Mandalorian was great, and then we're asking for the sentiment in response. Is it positive, is it neutral, or is it negative? And just reading this line, it says it understands what you want from it. So you want the sentiment, and it also gives you that the sentiment is positive. And please remember, this model was not trained with any data set that says great means positive. It just knows that. Another example, which is very topical for our event today, is the request to give some blog topics about being a woman in tech. And the 4 ideas that it gives is: how do you deal with imposter syndrome? What are the biggest challenges for women in tech? How can we make it easier for women to go in tech? And how can we encourage more women to start companies? And also there's the content creation, which is pretty much the first half of this presentation. So I will say thank you very much. If you want to follow more of my experiments with OpenAI, I am on Twitter, and I would love to chat with you and hear thoughts. Thanks, and have a great event and rest of your day. Sending greetings from Berlin, where Women's Day is an official bank holiday.